Ohio doesn't have too many amusement parks, but has one of the best roller coaster lineups of any state because of two major Cedar Fair parks in Cedar Point and Kings Island. In this video, I will rank the top 25 roller coasters I have personally ridden in the state of Ohio. And before starting this list, I want to note that I never made it to Geauga Lake or LeSwordsville Lake, so coasters from both these parks will not be on the list. This is primarily a ranking of Cedar Point and Kings Island's roller coasters, with the exception of one ride, which actually starts off this list at number 25, Tornado at Stricker's Grove. This wooden coaster was built in-house by the park owner, yet it's a very smooth ride. This double out and back coaster has several bunny hills, but only one of them delivers any airtime. The back row has two additional spots of airtime, some mild airtime on the first drop, and a surprising pop of airtime on a steep drop halfway through the ride. 24. Mean Streak at Cedar Point. I'm ranking this off my front row rides. Up front, Mean Streak didn't hurt. While the ride was slow, that was deliberate. Mean Streak had maybe one or two pops of airtime at most, but it was still decently enjoyable weaving your way around that dense wooden structure. Now, if I were to rate my ride in the back, it is among the worst roller coaster rides I've ever experienced. It was brutal back there. 23. Wicked Twister at Cedar Point. The tallest currently operating Intamin Impulse coaster is a rush. While I do prefer the ones with the holding brake, the double twisting spires are very disorienting. I also love the ride's placement next to the beach. 22. Backlot Stunt Coaster at Kings Island. No joke, this is one of the few rides that consistently causes me to gray out. That upwards helix after the first launch looks slow, but it sustains the G's for so long that I always start seeing gray. The rest of the ride is a solid family coaster. There are a few pops of airtime, and it's the best themed coaster in the entire state in my opinion. 21. Vortex at Kings Island. While I didn't love Vortex as much as some, it was a decent aero multi-looper. The first drop had some good airtime in the back row, and the ride had great positive G's on the back-to-back vertical loops and the pull-out on the batwing. The ride also had some very un-aero-like hang time on the corkscrews and start of the batwing. The downside with this coaster were the jerky transitions peppered throughout though. 20. Racer at Kings Island. This is a classic coaster with some decent airtime, and if you're up front, it's reasonably smooth, which allows you to enjoy all that airtime. However, wheel seats and anything towards the back can be quite bumpy. This is another coaster that I am ranking off my front row rides. 19. Rougarou at Cedar Point. This ride's first half is great. The vertical loop is forceful, and that inclined loop may be one of my favorite elements on any floorless coaster. It's extremely forceful and disorienting. However, I'm not a fan of the second half. It's fairly slow, and the constant changes of direction can cause head banging if you aren't careful. 18. Bat at Kings Island. There aren't many aero suspended coasters left, but this is my favorite layout of the ones I've ridden. Bat has a great setting in the woods, and it holds its speed start to finish thanks to that big drop at the start. This results in some really wild swinging, particularly in the second half. 17. Firehawk at Kings Island. One of the few Vekoma Flying Dutchman coasters ever erected, Firehawk was the smoothest of the three. While I never loved those trains, I thought Firehawk had a superior layout to the B&M Superman clones found at the Six Flags parks. I loved the forceful vertical loop and the disorienting inline twists towards the end. 16. Beast at Kings Island. This was one of the hardest coasters on this list to rank. Beast is a really unique coaster. It's extremely long and has a wonderful setting through the woods, but it also doesn't do that much with the length. The coaster has barely any hills, and the only exciting element is that double helix finale at the end. Beast can also be quite bumpy. However, night rides on Beast are legendary because of how isolated you feel from the rest of the world. I'd say the Beast is a flawed coaster, but an incredible experience at night because of that setting. 15. Flight of Fear at Kings Island. This indoor launch coaster is a bit jerky, but the lap bar trains prevent any pain, for me at least. The launch is decent, and the first half is extremely disorienting, whipping through the initial 3 inversions. The stop in the midcourse is a buzzkill though, but the ride regains its speed in the second half and eventually flies through an awesome corkscrew. If Flight of Fear didn't stop in the midcourse, like the outdoor clones at the Six Flags parks, this ride would be considerably higher, but that break really kills the pacing. 14. Banshee at Kings Island. I had a real tough time placing Banshee. If I graded it off my best rides, it would be in the top 10 easily. But I've gotten some really rattly rides on 2 of my past 3 visits. I think it's train related, but a bad ride on Banshee really rattles. It rattles worse than any other B&M I've ridden. And that's a shame because Banshee has some decently forceful elements and a great sense of speed in the valleys. 13. Gemini at Cedar Point. This is one of the more underrated roller coasters at Cedar Point. This hybrid steel coaster has a layout more akin to an old racing wooden coaster. The ride usually races, is fairly smooth, and has some really nice airtime throughout. Now, if I had ridden at Geauga Lake, this is where Dominator would have placed. Like I said, I never made it to Geauga Lake, but I have ridden their former star attraction in its new home at King's Dominion. Dominator is an above-average floorless coaster. While it lacks a zero-G roll, I love everything else about the coaster. It's smooth, decently forceful, and a nice long ride. Number 12. Raptor at Cedar Point. This is a solid B&M invert. The first half has the typical curved first drop, vertical loop, and zero-G roll, but then it's followed by a snappy cobra roll. The second half has some whippy corkscrews and an extremely forceful final helix. Just hope that you aren't trimmed too hard in the mid-course brake run. And the ride is very smooth outside of the abrupt transition into the brake run at the end. Number 11. Valravn at Cedar Point. I know a lot of people like to hate on Valravn, but I do enjoy this dive coaster. The views leading up to the first drop are breathtaking, and the 2 main drops deliver some wonderful sustained floater airtime. The implements feel like throwaway elements, but the super slow zero-G roll in the second half delivers some awesome hang time. Plus, the ride is glass smooth. Yes, it does have the vest restraints, which aren't as good to experience the airtime, but Valravn has a solid layout for a dive coaster. Number 10. Gatekeeper at Cedar Point. My favorite B&M looper at Cedar Point, Gatekeeper is more graceful than forceful, but I really enjoy the coaster. The wing over drop is a ton of fun with the hang time at the start and the forceful valley. That's followed by a B&M Hyper-esque camelback, a hang type build corkscrew, and some great near misses with the main entrance. Number 9. Blue Streak at Cedar Point. This is my guilty pleasure ride at Cedar Point. Blue Streak delivers some solid airtime on every single hill in every row. Just make sure you ride up front though, because it can get bumpy anywhere else. Up front, Blue Streak is a very smooth ride, and the airtime is fantastic because you're not getting beaten to death. Number 8. Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. The definition of short but sweet. Top Thrill Dragster's launch is exhilarating. There are few coaster sensations better than being pinned against your seat with your cheeks being power blasted by the wind. I also love the giant top hat. It gives solid airtime over the top and one of the best views of any coaster. Make sure you can ride up front if possible. Number 7. Magnum XL-200 at Cedar Point. The original Hypercoaster is still a very good coaster. The first half offers amazing views of Lake Erie, plus some decent airtime, but Magnum's bread and butter is the return run. The ejector airtime on the bunny hills are as strong as any coaster. The one downside with Magnum though is that the airtime can get a bit uncomfortable. My biggest tip is to tighten the seatbelt to the max to try to minimize the pain you experience from the airtime. Number 6. Diamondback at Kings Island. Whereas Magnum feels completely out of control, Diamondback feels very controlled. However, it's also a far more comfortable experience, which is why I give it the edge. The first 3 hills give some of the best sustained airtime of any B&M Hyper. Then comes the trim. It definitely saps the ride's speed from that point, but the airtime is still very sustained for the return run, even if it isn't quite as strong as the first few hills. I also love this coaster setting through the woods and the visual splendor of the splashdown finale. Starting off the top 5 is Maverick at Cedar Point. This intimate launch coaster is a jack of all trades. It has an amazing first drop, whippy transitions, several strong airtime hills, some decent inversions, and a great launch. It's a very intense coaster. I just don't seem to like Maverick as much as other enthusiasts, and I can't pinpoint a good reason why. The only issue I really have with Maverick are the restraints. They don't hurt, they just feel a bit bulky. Number 4, Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. My favorite GCI is a fantastic wooden coaster. It has near perfect pacing as the coaster charges its way through the woods. Mystic Timbers feels way faster than its posted 53 mph speed as you whiz past trees and over the River Rapids ride. And every single hill delivers some sort of airtime, whether it be an abrupt pop or more sustained floater airtime. Plus, this is one of my favorite night rides, and unpopular opinion, I think it's a better night ride than the Beast. It's just as dark and much more intense with all those airtime hills. Number 3, Orion at Kings Island. With every ride in Orion, I have liked it more and more. The coaster is just pure fun. The sense of speed up front is excellent in the valleys. The first drop is incredible, like the other B&M Gigas. The sustained airtime the whole way down is breathtaking. The airtime on the subsequent hills is fantastic as well. You have some sideways airtime on the wave turn and post helix hill, plus some very strong and sustained flagector airtime on the speed hill and camelback. I also love the theming and soundtrack around Orion because it really gets you amped up for the ride. Number 2, Millennium Force at Cedar Point. The original Giga Coaster is unequivocally a front row ride for me. The first drop feels like you're plunging into a black hole because I always gray out in that overbank, and I usually don't regain my vision until I'm through the following tunnel. This coaster holds its speed start to finish, and it's absolutely surreal to rocket through Millennium Island in such open trains. This coaster doesn't have many airtime hills, but the ones it has give some really nice airtime because of those open T-bar restraints. And coming in at number 1 is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. My favorite steel coaster is a masterpiece. Steel Vengeance holds the record for the most airtime of any coaster, and it's not hard to see why. This is an incredibly long ride, and you spend most of it out of your seat. You have major sustained ejector on the first drop and massive camelbacks towards the start of the ride. You also have great hang time in the inversions, and then you have strong ejector pops in the smaller hills, particularly on the relentless finale. So those are my top 25 roller coasters in the state of Ohio. Do you agree with this list? I would love to hear your thoughts and comments down below. If you enjoyed this countdown, I'd appreciate if you gave this video a like and consider subscribing because there will be a lot more amusement park and roller coaster videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.